Ray Garrison taught many people to play chess, and I was lucky to get the chance to meet him while he was still on this earth. On December 20th of 2025, Ray Garrison peacefully passed away in his home, and he was my chess coach and a friend to many. Ray Garrison was just a wonderful man, and even though I only knew him for a couple of years, it was truly a blessing. So, today I'll be reviewing his most famous game. This game has the latest occurrence of castling, thus making it his most famous. Without further ado, let's get right into it. This was a classical chess game between Michael Neschwat and Ray Garrison, my chess coach. And classical simply means that these people get a certain amount of hours to make their moves. In this case, 56. So, Neschwat took the white pieces, and Mr. Garrison took the black pieces. And to begin the game, Michael Neschwat played d4. In response to this, a principled man, Mr. Garrison played knight to f6, the Indian game. The general idea of this is something like, if this, then just after everything here, you get fianchettoed here, and you don't really just castle. Instead, you're just waiting for the opponent to castle on a specific side. If he castles queen side, you castle king side and launch an attack on the queen side. Now, it's not what actually happened in the game. What happened in the game is the opponent played c4, giving Mr. Garrison the opportunity to play the Benoni defense, which is c5. Now, the idea of this is if takes, then eventually, generally not immediately, first you play e6, but you're going to play queen a5, and you're going to have this check that ends up picking up this pawn. And it's just a nice little trade, not a sacrifice at all. And so, instead of taking, because Neschwat knew theory, he played knight to f3. After takes, Mr. Garrison played queen to a5 check. And after the bishop blocks, this is actually not the best move. You see, the queen was defending this knight earlier. But now, because this bishop is in the way, it actually cannot get around to defend the knight. And this pawn is also unprotected. They can both be attacked from the same square, which gave Mr. Garrison the opportunity to play queen to b6, which is forking them, which forces knight to b3, because this is interposing between the queen and the pawn, so now the queen cannot simply take, and this knight is defended by the pawn and the queen, and this puts white in a very solid position. So after knight to e4, actually threatening mate, bishop to e3 was actually the best move here, because this defends this pawn, attacks this queen, white gets a tempo, and all of black's threats are seemingly stopped, but that's not what happened in the game. Instead, Neschwat played e3, immediately losing all of his advantage. Why does this lose all the advantage? Well, now the queen can simply redirect, and now, of course, you don't want to push your f-pawn so much. You know, this threat is reinstated, and so queen to f3 is basically mandatory now. And all of a sudden, you have really bad pawn structure. You have double pawns, you have an open g-file, which means it's very difficult to castle on the king side. You have bad pawn structure, you have just isolated, doubled, and this is just not going to fare very well for you in an endgame, which is why it's actually advantageous for black. Now, of course, Mr. Garrison does play knight takes d2, and even though Neshawat has all these pieces out, these pawns, and just such easy development, black's actually better here because of this pawn structure and this open g file, and just how open everything is. Like, this diagonal's open, that'll be important later. And there's just so many positional weaknesses in this position. So, Mr. Garrison plays knight to c6, simply developing. After a3, which prevents the knight from hopping into b4, which is actually not a threat, because all that does is force you to commit the king and, to avoid this fork, right? And committing the king to the queen's side is actually not so bad. But Neshawat did not realize that, so it's whatever. He seemingly wanted to keep the king in the center, where it was at least protected by a couple of pawns, but who knows? So after d6, seeking to open up the light-squared bishop, which is actually a very instructional move, because once this bishop moves away from here, a bishop on h3 is going to be making it very difficult for him to castle kingside. Because say he goes here and gets us out, and then he castles kingside. Well, now take a look at this. Now, after something like f5, just getting into this position, then it's going to be a serious threat later on of just going here and getting this rook in the game. That could end up being mate. So it's always good to keep this light squared bishop on this diagonal. Or you could just play bishop to h3 later, and right now, and just control that diagonal here and make it impossible for him to castle kingside, in case you believe that you cannot exploit that properly. But instead of all that, Neshawat played bishop to e2, a principled man. Just trying to develop, of course. And so after g6, seeking to fianchetto this bishop and put pressure along this long diagonal. Neshawat defends the pawn on b2 with rook to b1. Simply a bit of a preemptive move there. So after a5, seeking to hop into a4 and maybe attack this knight, kick it away. After Neshawat castles kingside. Now, we don't play bishop to h6 yet. Instead, we play a4, which is actually very accurate. Knight c1 is played because he just wants to get out of danger, and of course, normally a knight on any of these rims is a pretty bad thing to have. But in this case, if he had gone here, for example, knight to d4, then after knight takes, then you have these really isolated pawns, and it's not going to be easy for you. This pawn is backwards; it can't join its buddies because of this one. And so at the end of this, you just have really terrible pawn structure, and black's going to be winning an endgame. So instead, of course, he plays knight c1, as mentioned earlier. And after bishop to f5, attacking the rook, Neshawat actually plays e4 here, which disconnects the bishop from the rook. Right? I mean, it can't go anywhere. And so Now, after bishop to e6, just getting the bishop away from there. Nishawat plays rook to d1, centralizing the rook. And so now bishop h6. Now bishop h6. Why bishop h6? Well, bishop h6 simply gets the bishop to a place where you might get some use out of it, because the bishop's not going to do anything on this g7 square. There's no juicy pieces along here. There's nothing. I mean, there's this pawn, but it's defended, and you're not going to get another attacker anytime soon. So bishop h6, because that just gets a piece into the attack. And king g2, preventing bishop to h3. And after knight to d4, offering a trade of the knight for the bishop. Neshawat says no thank you to that trade and plays bishop to d3. And after rook to a5, getting a rook out along this very, very active rank. Neshawat then plays knight to f1. After rook to g5, Neshawat blocks with the knight. And now here, Mr. Garrison brilliantly sacrifices the knight. Because, why? Because if takes, then after bishop to g4, you end up skewering and picking up the rook. And so, of course, this knight is untouchable. And instead, b4 is played. And Mr. Garrison does not do the funny en passant. He actually should have watched more Reddit memes, because instead, he plays bishop to g7, which is actually a blunder, because, as Levy Rosman is always saying, danger levels, because now if king takes f3, the same skewer does not work, because after this, he's actually getting back his rook. And there's just nothing you can really do about that. But, thankfully, Neshawat did not reevaluate the sacrifice, and instead he played bishop to e2. After knight to h4, stepping away from danger, Neshawat plays king to h1. Finally, we see bishop to h3, which is a real exploitation of the pawn structure along here. It's actually a rather horrible pawn structure. There's just nothing that Neshawat can do to kick away any of these pieces from his king side. And that's going to make it really difficult for him. It's going to cause problems later on. It's going to cause problems now, actually. And so after f4, which actually traps Mr. Garrison's rook, if you don't see, look at that. Bishop controls this, pawn controls all this, pawn, and his own pieces block the retreat. So after bishop to g2 check, which is actually a great move, it forces the king to g1. After bishop takes e4, no, you cannot take this rook, because if so, I will take your other rook, and you will have given me an equal trade when you were down material. And that is not going to be good, because you already have my rook trapped, and there's just nothing really going for you. So instead of that, of course, Neshawat plays knight to d3, and after bishop to d4, king to f1 is played. Now, here, Mr. Garrison actually takes the knight. This is called a desperado sacrifice. Desperado means basically, okay, I'm going to lose this piece anyways. There is nothing I can do about this. I'm just going to accept that I'm losing it, and I am going to get the most I can out of this piece before it is taken by your army. So after h takes g3, knight to f5, attacking both this pawn and this fork. So Neshawat plays rook d to c1, stepping out of danger. And after knight takes g3, just picking up a free pawn. King to e1 is forced. And now bishop to e3, cutting off the king's escape routes and attacking this rook here, forcing him to move, thus winning a tempo. And after rook to d1, the white king has nowhere to move. Take a look. This is covered by the knight. This square is covered by the bishop. This square is also covered by the bishop. This square is covered by his own piece. This square is covered by his own piece. There was nothing he can do about that. So there's actually some significant pressure on white's king. It can't move anywhere. There are a bunch of pieces just chilling around here. And there's always the threat of Garrison castling and getting the rook in the attack, and just going over here and checkmating. So, Mr. Garrison plays knight to f5, rerouting the knight. Neshawat plays rook to b2, just ensuring that he's not going to be able to hop into c2. And so after bishop to d4, taking away the rook again, rook a2 is played. Now, after knight to e3, attacking the rook, there's a lot of attacking the rook going on here. Rook to c1, knight to g2, check. King f1, bishop e3, kicking away the rook again, and also adding an attacker to this pawn here. So after knight c4 is actually a rather funny move, because if you're to take with the knight here, then it's not going to be as advantageous, because now you kind of lose a bit of momentum here. And sure, you have the two bishops, but you don't have the knight that can hop everywhere. And so instead of that, he actually plays bishop d4, kicking away the rook, and bishop e3, just repeating moves. Yes, I understand that repeating moves is generally not what you want to do, but in classical tournaments, you can actually repeat moves once for time. There's something called an intermission, and just repeating moves once can give you time. Now, Neshawat does not continue the repetition. Instead, he plays rook to b1, arguing that since he is actually up the exchange, he might be winning this game and does not want to draw. Now, it's easy to look at the evaluation and go, oh my god, oh, Garrison is so winning here, but it's not that simple. It's not that easy. I mean, say I put you into this position. How about you took here? I mean, that's already 2 points of your advantage gone. And you take this pawn, sure. But, I mean, just after a couple random moves, you're not nearly as winning as you were. And it's just not so clear when you don't have this evaluation bar. So, after all this, he finally does take on f4, because this knight is actually pinned right now. If it does take, then you actually lose the rook, and this is significantly easier, and it's actually going to be a double attack here. And after something like this, then boom, just a trade, and well, black's up a million pawns, and he should be easily winning here. So instead of that, Neshawat decides to break the pin with rook to d1, and after knight to e6, just hopping away from the knight's reach, knight to f2 is played. Now, this is attacking the bishop and offering a trade yet again, which Mr. Garrison does not oblige. And after bishop to d3, offering trade once again, knight d4, he decides to trade on his own terms. Now after bishop takes f5, knight takes f5, everything takes on f5. Neshawat plays king to e2, which actually kind of immobilizes this knight here, because this knight is serving the defense of this bishop, and if this knight is to ever move away to anywhere without him moving this bishop first, then he's actually going to be losing the bishop, right? And so because of that, bishop h6, moving away from any strange tactics there. After knight to e4, trying to maybe get something on the queen side. Garrison finally brings that bishop back to g7. That bishop really went on a rampage, destroying Black's queen side, but finally retires and just gets all the way back here. So after c5, which is a rather incredible pawn break, Garrison takes. After knight takes, knight d4 is played because, it's defended by the bishop. Which, so then on move 48 of this game, Black finally decides to castle. Garrison finally decides to castle. Which is actually the latest castling of any game, as I have told you earlier. Now, after knight takes a4, which is actually a slight inaccuracy, it was better to take on b7, because then you get an immediate pass pawn. E5. Why e5? I'm not sure. Probably trying to play for some type of promotion. I don't know what was going through these players' minds, but this is all I can say. So after knight c5, Mr. Garrison actually plays a rather smart move, which is knight to b5. Sure, the computer says it's a mistake, but now if takes, then I fork you, and I am picking up one of these rooks. I mean, here it's actually worse, but still. So instead of that capture, Neshawat plays rook to d7, avoiding the fork. After b6, rook b7 is played. And now, actually, this pawn is pinned. Because now, if takes, then he can just take on b5, and he's actually winning now. White is winning, because these pawns are going to be very difficult for white to stop. Sorry, for black to stop. And so instead, he plays knight to c3. And after rook to c2, he plays e4, unveiling this bishop that had been hidden by the pawn. Finally reinstating the defense of the knight. And so after rook takes b6, e3 check is played. Why e3 check? Because if takes, then I win your rook, and I'm winning by actually a rather large amount. So instead of that, king to e1. Now this is actually not the best move here, because the king doesn't have any real place to go here. Because this knight and this pawn are controlling everything. And so after rook to d8, actually threatening checkmate here, you are forced to move your rook here. Now your king is actually blocking your rook from going along here, and all these pieces that have been so intricately woven into this net here are preventing the white king from getting the fuck out in the way of the rook. And so because of that, he's just able to play h5, and here Neshawat actually resigned the game because he has no counterplay whatsoever, and there's just nothing he's able to do. Now, if we go to review here, give it a moment. You'll actually notice that Mr. Garrison played like a 2300 despite this game being played well over 20 years ago. And he was an intermediate player back then, so even back then he had some potential. And this was just a beautiful game that I really wanted to share with all of you as a tribute to my coach and as a testament to his skill. This will be this video's conclusion. As always, this has been Blundered Games, signing off. Ciao.